What's up, everyone? Thanks for tuning in today for another episode of Niners News here on 49ers Hive. My name is Zach Hernandez. I'm joined by my co-host Matt Llewellyn, and today we're going to be talking some 49ers, specifically which training camp battles we are excited to watch. Matt, why don't you go ahead and go first? Let us know which training camp battles you have an eye on.
Yeah, my training camp battle that I'm most interested in is to see the starting cornerbacks. And, most people think that it's going to be a competition between Ahkello Witherspoon and Emmanuel Moseley. But I'm going to throw Richard Sherman in there. I mean, they can trot him out to start, but as we saw at the end of last year, there is some decline there. And, as much as you want to be loyal to, players and leaders and things like that, best players are going to play, you know what I mean? And for me, it's going to be very interesting to see with no offseason, really, no preseason games, nothing like that, who they trot out there, because it's going to be really dependent on what you see in team practice. So if Witherspoon and Moseley are killing it, and Sherman's getting burnt toast in that new kind of revamped wide receiver locker room, then I wouldn't be surprised to see Sherman maybe coming off the bench, or maybe they look to move him. And I know that 49er fans are going to really disagree with that, but it's one of those things where we see it all the time, where you get an aging vet who there's that threshold where all of a sudden, hey, we're good, and then they start to decline a little bit, and then as before you know it, they're on the bench. And that I think that can be a real situation here. There's been numerous examples, and it wasn't just in the NFC Championship game or the Super Bowl. He's had a hard time covering the top end receivers, and I know there were stats out there saying like, oh, he only gives up 0.8 yards per pass coverage snap, or whatever those advanced metrics numbers. But when quarterbacks look his way, he can be beat. And, those stats are based on a reputation that he has. But sooner or later, someone's going to test him. They're going to test him consistently. And it's going to be whether or not he can, match up to that. So for me, I do expect him to stay as the left cornerback and start for the 49ers. But it's going to be an interesting battle, to say the least.
When I think of Richard Sherman having struggles, I think of Mike Evans. I think Mike Evans totally took him to town. He gave him, he ran him up and down the field. He was having a field day, essentially, with all due respect to Richard Sherman. Mm-hmm. Mike Evans is just younger. He's faster. He's bigger. And he struggles with those type of wide receivers. So I could definitely see that. I know a lot of fans are kind of going to be upset to hear that. We've had comments in our last video saying that we have it totally wrong on Sherman. Look, we're not saying Sherman's trash. We're not saying he's in the bottom tier of corners in the league, but he's not what he used to be. Right. And Father Time is undefeated. That happens to every single player. So and it
happens quick too. If you remember, I mean, his arch nemesis, Darrelle Revis fell off a cliff. Just all of a sudden, he was just bad. And I think all it took was somebody to just test him. And you said Mike Evans, and for as physically gifted as Mike Evans is not exactly a burner. You know what I mean? Like, he's not the fastest dude out there. He's relatively fast, and he's fast for his size. But you look at guys like, Stephon Diggs made him look silly on a route, Sherman just 10 yards off, Again, we talk about Devontae Adams and Sammy Watkins in the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl respectively, where he just got beat, and you're going to have the plays like he had against Cleveland where he undercuts a route and gets an interception like he did against Baker Mayfield. But that's going to become more of the exception rather than the rule. And instead of being a top 3 cornerback, maybe he's only a top 20 cornerback. And, you think, the fans can be mad at that, but like that degree really matters. The difference between top 3 and top 20, that's a huge gap.
It does. And, like you said, he's kind of known for undercutting those routes. He relies a lot at this point in his career on his experience and his technique. And it doesn't always get there when you're getting beat by physicality. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. For me, I'm extremely excited to watch the wide receiver battle play out. I just had Leo Luna of Sports Illustrated on. Go check out that interview if you guys haven't. I'll drop it in the description below. And, I told him the same thing. And you could call me more of your stereotypical NFL fan because it's a bit of a flashier, sexier position. But there's a lot of talent on that wide receiver group. And they just drafted Brandon Ayuk. Last year you got Deebo. The year before that you got Dante Pettis. It's like there's a lot of talent that is all within a year or two here. And it's cultivating. And it's really exciting to see what's going to happen. Who is going to step up now that Emmanuel Sanders is in New Orleans. There's no veteran in that room. Marquise Goodwin is now in Philadelphia, and he's not even playing this year. So there's no veteran leadership. There's no veteran presence. So they had Travis Benjamin, and he opted out as well. That was the most closest thing they had to a vet on that positional group. So I think we've seen Deebo say before earlier in this offseason, he's going to learn how to step up, even though he's not the most vocal leader. He's going to try and not only be vocal, but show it by his actions. Go out in the field and get the job done and show these younger receivers what it really takes. Because if anybody has had success out of that group, it's Deebo. And that's not even saying much because he's only had about a year, half a year, 3/4 of a year of success. But it's a lot more than most of these other guys. So I'm really excited to see how this shapes out, I should say. Who wins what, how the depth chart shapes out, especially with the expanded roster sizes. We could see guys that normally wouldn't have a spot make it and make a name for themselves. Guys like Juwan Jennings, Richie James, he might not have made this roster if not for the expanded roster size. So I just really think that that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I think Travis Benjamin opting out actually really did help Richie James' chances at remaining on the team, because Benjamin really, people were like, oh, well, he's not even a good wide receiver. But what he is a good return guy. And, I've said it before, Richie James is okay on punt returns. He's like, middle of the road guy, but he is really bad on kick returns. And I just don't. You'd like to see somebody else there. It's probably not going to happen. But I do agree with you. There's a lot of uncertainty in that wide receiver room. And when you think about it and you think that, Trent Taylor is the guy that, off the top of my head, that has the most experience on the team, but he's missed a lot of time. So, you're talking about, Trent Taylor, maybe a guy like Dante Pettis even is one of the guys that is going to come in with the most experience. It's weird to think about, that they don't really have any firmly established veterans, and that's going to be something that I think is going to put a little bit more pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo and George Kittle to kind of rein them in and, let them know, hey, this is what we need to do and get it going. And so there's another hashtag pay George Kittle moment right there. It's Kittle being a leader for the wide receivers as well. So, and then, it's, you want to see something out of Juwan Jennings. It'd be nice. He was a late round pick. They're all going to have their opportunities. That's for sure. Especially with Deebo just now looking like he's doing some rehab work. There's video out of him making some cuts on that foot. We don't know when he's going to be back. You obviously want to ease him in. There's going to be no preseason games this year, really. So, I mean, it's not like you can put him out there for, 5-10 plays and then pull him back and see how he does. I mean, by the time Deebo's ready for them to put him in the game, it's going to be real games. So it remains to be seen how that's going to affect the room too. Jalen Hurd coming back from injury, Trent Taylor coming back from injury. And that's really, when you take into account the mental lapses that Dante Pettis had, and you can even consider that a form of injury, as far as, he had a sophomore slump and he's got a confidence problem, and that needs to be rehabbed and fixed. So you got a lot of wide receivers with a lot of injuries coming back, a lot of uncertainty. So yeah, I think you're right on that.
And, all of this talk about wide receivers, we haven't even talked about Kendrick Bourne. He's kind of up there with Trent Taylor as well with experience. Yeah. He's not really thought of as a vet because he's more of the playful, youthful type of receiver. He's a big kid out there on the field.
He has put work in this offseason that you can see. I mean, if social media is to be believed, like what's going on behind the scenes, Kendrick Bourne is trying to light the world on fire with how much he's working out there. So that'll be very interesting to see too. And actually, now that I think about it, Kendrick Bourne, I don't know what year he's in, but he's got to be up there as far as close to the top as far as receiver experience goes. I think he's in year 4, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, we don't even talk about Kendrick Bourne, but really he's, to me, the way that he's worked and the uncertainty everywhere else, he might be one of the guys that's a starter, like right off the bat.
Yeah, I agree. He's probably one of the closest things to a sure thing they have in the wide receiver group outside of Deebo Samuel. And he's, like you said, he's put in the work, man. He's been grinding hard. He shows it. And, not all receivers, not all NFL players get the fans a glimpse into that life. And he chooses to let us in on that. And it's kind of cool to see from a fan perspective what it takes, that daily grind to really improve as a receiver, as a player in the NFL, because it's not easy. And we've always heard it's not easy, but it's a different thing to see it. And he's out there showing us. So it's cool to have that insight. But I think that's going to do it for us today, guys.
Actually, before we go, one more, and this is just a little bonus that nobody's talking about. Man, I really want to see Trent Williams try to block Nick Bosa. I want to see that. That's not a position battle, but I mean, it's gonna be a battle. So look out for that.
Yeah, that's going to be a big one.
Yeah.
Two incredibly talented football players. One's a Mack truck, and the other one's just speed and power and technique. Matt, he recently posted a video to his Instagram account, kind of cutting on some soft surfaces.
I think he's like right on schedule. It does get me excited though. It means that he's at a point where there's probably not any significant setback, and there probably won't be. He's running on that particular surface as a rehab measure. I've seen people freaking out, like, why are they rushing him? You know how Twitter is. Everybody freaks out about everything. Everybody wants to play Doogie Howser MD on social. But they're like, hey, why are you rushing him? There's no rush, this and this and that. Reality is he's about 7 or 8 weeks removed from his surgery. So at this point, this is what you want to see. And I think they are taking their time with him. And the team wouldn't have him doing this stuff or allow him to do this stuff if they weren't in on it and wanted him to do this. So everybody's at the facility now. So he's under team care. So all that freaking out is kind of weird. But it is exciting to see it. You hope he gets back, because he's, as of right now, he's kind of the de facto wide receiver one. He's the most dynamic playmaker we have outside of George Kittle, and especially in the receiver room. So, who's to say? I just think that people freak out because they have the lingering after effects of Trent Taylor taking so long, and Trent Taylor, barely being out of a walking boot as of a couple months ago. So everybody is going to be overly cautious with that. But, it's good to see, they're not super hard cuts. He's not, running routes or anything, but it's a good first step.
Yeah, when I saw that, I thought, ooh, okay, it's nice to see, because, he captioned it 7 weeks post-surgery. It is right along schedule. And, yeah, it is funny, like you said, people are kind of saying that he's being rushed. He should take his time. I think he wouldn't be doing this if the trainers and the doctors weren't okay with it. I don't think they'd risk injuring him further, knowing how much is on his shoulders and how big of a plan they have for him this year. He's a big part of this offense now moving forward, so they can't really risk further injuring his leg or his foot. So I don't think that he would be doing that if he wasn't supposed to. But right. It's nice to see. And Matt, as a medical professional, is that kind of what you're expecting to see as far as like the cutting and the movement in that foot at this point?
Well, I don't particularly deal with like foot injuries or things like that. I'm more like acute trauma and acute patient situations with like illness and stuff like that, obviously. But from everything that I know about injuries like this, it's one of those things where if you see this stuff, you're on the right track, so it would be more concerning if we weren't seeing stuff, because as a player who's obviously chomping at the bit to get out there, and you got the beginning of a new season, you have unfinished business from last year in the Super Bowl. You're talking about a guy that wants to be out there bad. And if we weren't seeing anything at this point, because training camp is where everybody's like, okay, what's going on with this? I'm sure everybody's, waiting to see how D Ford looks exploding off the line, and everybody's going to put that under a microscope. With everything as boiled down as it is, considering circumstances, with a lack of news, and it's not like we can go out to the facilities and take a look. We're just waiting for any information that we can get, whether it be on social media, whether it be through the NFL and their filming and stuff like that. Everybody's just waiting on pins and needles to see what the thing is. So if we weren't seeing anything from Deebo, I think that would be more indicative of a problem. But because he's showing this stuff, it shows me that he's probably right on schedule.
Yeah, and for me personally, I think that he is still going to have a pretty big year, even with a couple of games missed. I'm not sure if he'll top 1,000, maybe in total yards, but I still think that he's going to have a big chunk of this offense is going to be carved out for him. Do you think that he'll have more total yards than he did last year, even with the games missed from injury?
That's hard to say, because looking at who's coming back, I mean, if Trent Taylor stays healthy, if Jalen Hurd stays healthy, how Brandon Ayuk comes in and contributes, George Kittle stays healthy, Jet McKinnon, what's he going to bring coming back? I mean, you all of a sudden look, and if everything goes correctly, this team is flush with offensive talent. So to say, I mean, man, I would expect it because I think he had like 800 or 900 yards from scrimmage last year, and I think he could do a lot better than that. But it's hard to tell which way the wind's going to blow as far as who's Jimmy Garoppolo going to really bond with outside of George Kittle, who we obviously know he's a big fan of. But it did seem like him and Deebo Samuel did have the rapport. It'll be interesting to see because we know how much he likes Trent Taylor. If Trent Taylor takes away from that, it's a weird thing to say. It's always better to have too much talent than too little. But that means that some of that production from better players or whatever kind of can be brought down the more talent you have. So it remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's going to be the case of a lot of mouths to feed. But he, like we've said before, he's going to be the de facto number one receiver going into this year. And until somebody else steps up and proves otherwise, he's the best receiver they have on this roster right now. And I don't think that's, by a stretch by any means. He showed last year that he's extremely physical. He's not afraid to go over across the middle. He's not afraid to take the big hits. He'll do whatever it takes to get the job done. And that's exactly what you want in a receiver. He's a running back running out there running routes, So does that give you any sort of worry that how physical he does play, that he might re-injure that foot?
Not so much the foot, but I do think that play style will lead to, little knick-knack, ticky-tack injuries. And so, but you worry about that with every player, when George Kittle got that 4th and 2 in New Orleans and the dude was grabbing at his face mask, and at the end you see him go down kind of weird and he was kind of stiff-legged, and you're like, man, got to watch those knees. I mean, on that crackback block or whatever, when he was pulling and the defender just went straight into his knee. I mean, and he had that thing going on where everybody just held their breath, So you always worry about that with physical players just because the game is physical. And, the harder you hit somebody and the harder you get hit, the more likely you are to be injured. So from that perspective, I think there's a little bit more worry. Not that you sit there, with bated breath every time he touches the ball, but as far as the foot goes, no, I don't foresee him re-injuring it because he placed the contact so much, especially when he broke the foot. There was no contact there. That was just, rumor was he was wearing cleats that he wasn't supposed to be wearing, and that kind of led to the injury or whatever. So, and I have no idea whether that's true or not. But it was something where he was running routes and he broke the foot. So from that aspect, no, I'm not too worried about that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's not like it's a arm or shoulder or something where you're, going into people constantly. And yeah, just real quick on that George Kittle. I don't know if you saw the 49ers posted that full game on their YouTube channel the other day, and they posted it on their Instagram, and George Kittle commented, "Can we just skip the first play on offense, please? Because that's where he took that knee to the helmet, or the helmet to the knee." So
yeah,
scary time, man. I know. Yeah. I was watching that at work on my phone, and I was just like, "Oh no, don't tell me George Kittle's seriously injured."
Yeah. It's a literal game of inches. I mean, like just hit that any other way, and he could have a torn ACL and be done. So yeah, that was a scary one.
Matt, there are some pictures going around social media right now of Joe. It looks like he's screaming like a monster, but he also looks a lot thinner. Is this kind of the new norm for offensive linemen that retire from the NFL?
I think with social media, it's the new norm. We've seen it recently with Joe Thomas. Before that, we saw it with Nick Hardwick, who was the center for the Chargers, who retired. And it just goes to show how difficult the NFL can be on the human body, as far as, Joe had to retire all of a sudden because of, a lingering neck issue that he had. I think it was spinal stenosis that put him at risk, and it's amazing how all these offensive linemen, after they're done playing with whatever malady they have, they all seem to just drop weight. And I think that just goes to show how much they have to eat to maintain weight, to bulk up and do all this stuff. And, it's a wonder that anybody makes it, as long as, Joe Staley did, because obviously it's really apparent that his body did not want to carry that weight, just like Joe Thomas's body did not want to carry that weight. You kind of have to force yourself, it's like the movies where you see a guy like, Chris Hemsworth or somebody or Chris Evans, they got to bulk up for these superhero roles. And, they all talk about it. Man, eating was like a full-time job. All I did was shovel food into my mouth, because I had to get those extra calories to stay bulked up. And that's just for acting. We're talking about a professional athlete who, for the course of, seasons upon seasons upon seasons, had to keep that weight up because he played a position that was so physically demanding and needed him to be a certain size. And the physical exertion that comes day in, day out with practice, the calorie expenditure there. So, I can't even imagine what was on Joe Staley's plate or what his dinner bills were, but I'm sure it was something obscene. And it's good to see that, and if he calls it's a conceit, he wanted to see some abs and stuff, but, it's good to see that he's listening to his body and allowing it to come back down. Cause man, it's baffling to me how those guys do it.
Yeah. He looks crazy. He looks like he lost a whole Joe Staley.
Yeah.
He's so thin. And like you said, it just speaks to what these guys go through to keep their body in NFL shape. There's being ready and athletic, and then there's being NFL ready and in shape for NFL play. And that's what he's been pretty much his whole career with the 49ers for, the better part of a decade and a half. How long is he with this team? Since 2005, 2006, I think?
2005, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so about 15 years this guy's been in tip-top shape, essentially, and he is looking really, really thin. And, yeah, I think, that speaks to him trying to enjoy his life now. He's not having to put his body through the tough stress and rigors of an NFL training camp and an NFL diet. So it's a lot to deal with, but it looks
2007, by the way. 2007 was when he was drafted. So about 14 years, if you count however the breakdown does with the years or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah. So, it's crazy to think how quickly these guys can lose weight when the normal person will go on a diet and work out for months and lose 40 pounds. And then Joe Staley can retire in, April and lose 80 pounds by now. It's just crazy. But, Matt, do you think that he will possibly get back into coaching? I know this is kind of off topic of weight loss, but do you think that a return to the 49ers in any sort of facility is in his future?
That's probably where it's going. You see a lot of these guys that just either get into broadcasting or coaching. They want to do something. It makes sense, especially with how much passion he had about the game. With the injury, you think about it, and did he really get to retire on his own terms? That's one of those things where, I wouldn't be surprised. So I'm looking at his player profile, and it looked like he played. His listed playing weight was 315. Man, that man looks like he's like a svelte 205 in that picture. We got to remember, I think he's like 6'5", 6'6", something like that. He's a tall dude. So for him to lose that type of weight, and he said in his when he talked about it, he said, "Man, I went from a size 40 to a size 36 in a month." As far as that's 4 inches off his waist. So it's pretty crazy, man.
That's insane. Yeah, he's a big man. And, while we're on the topic of Joe Staley, Matt is wearing our signature Come At Me Bro t-shirt. We still have some available for sale if you guys like them. Commemorate Joe Staley's career, his retirement, and hit us up if you guys want a t-shirt. They're 50% off right now. But back to the topic at hand. Yeah, Joe Staley, he kind of reminds me of like a Pat McAfee, to where he could totally have a career in broadcasting and podcasting.
Or apparently pro wrestling. I don't know if you saw that, but Pat McAfee's going to be a pro wrestler now. I don't know.
Yes, apparently that too. But I really do think that Joe Staley at some point down the line will return to the 49ers. He was asked about it, if I remember correctly, when he retired, and he pretty much said, look, I'm not ruling it out, but for now, I just need to spend time with my family. I've been away for so long, and I really just need to put them first for once. So,
and I think that's part of the weight loss too. If you think about it, man, you get beaten down. NFL's a physical sport. Now think about all the weight that you're carrying on top of that when you're at 315. He probably wants to play with his kids and hang out with his wife and do all this stuff. And maybe he does go the Pat McAfee route where he has a podcast or a show. We all know the Joe Show. He has the personality to do whatever he wants. and he's a 49ers legend, and the door will always be open for him. It's just good to see him in a happy and healthy spot, and I wish him all the best because he's probably top 5 49er for me all time, just from all the way around. Like, he's just such a fantastic part of the 49ers legacy. So it's good to see him in a healthy spot after so many years of injuries and, stuff like that, especially last year where he missed so many games and, his career was ended by injury. And I wish we would have got him the Super Bowl victory. But he looks good, man. He looks good.
He does. And I'll say this. When the 49ers win it this year, I'm sure they'll be sure to send him a ring.
Absolutely.
Matt, what are your expectations for Trent Williams going into this year?
I expect no drop-off from Joe Staley. And I know that's high expectation, especially after a year off. The year off, though, wasn't really for any type of injury reasons. He had that falling out with the Washington football team's medical staff. He had that bout of cancer on his scalp, and he didn't feel, good about coming back to play. Which, given all things considered in the world, the fact that he didn't opt out, even though he's had like a cancer scare before, just kind of goes to show what we can kind of expect out of him. He's raring to go, and he's one of the best talents to, ever play the position. He's a mauler. He's a beast. He's going to protect Jimmy's blind side. I have no doubt about that. And for me, it's just going to be exciting to see him get out there and just level people. I know we talked about it earlier with training camp battles and stuff like that, but it's going to be really interesting to see, him battle Nick Bosa day in, day out. And after a year off, talk about trial by fire. You're talking about the NFC Defensive Rookie of the Year, every down, every play coming up across you. Maybe they move D Ford there. I mean, he's going to get work. The Niners defensive line is one of the best in the league, and it will not take long to shake the rust out of that. So I expect huge things from Trent Williams in more ways than one. So it'll be great to see him out there on the field.
I'll go a step further, and I'll say not only would I not expect any drop off, I'll expect an improvement. And with all respect to Joe Staley, he was not the same Joe Staley as we've seen. He was dealing with injuries. He was kind of beat up throughout the year. He missed a lot of games. He wasn't himself. He wasn't the Joe Staley we're all used to. So I think going off from last year specifically onto this year, I think he'll be an improvement over protecting Jimmy's blind side. I think that having that year off actually helped him. And he's going to be fresh. He's going to be ready to go. And, he seems like he's extremely motivated coming into a positive environment. Unlike Washington, where he came from. We've all heard the stories. We've all heard of that environment there. We've all heard even Coach Shanahan talk about it, what a kind of, bleep show it is there. But I just think that he's motivated to be here. And he was talking about it when the 49ers had their media days, and he was saying it's nice to be here in an environment where, people take things seriously. A walkthrough here isn't just a literal walkthrough. We're actually going over things extensively. We're taking things, everything's going really fast, but it's so detailed. So it seems like he's really eager to learn and contribute. And he knows that it's a winning organization. It's a winning feel already. And he's trying to do his best. It seems like from an outsider looking in to kind of fit in. And like you said, going against Nick Bosa and possibly D Ford, what better way can you shake that rust off than that, going against the best of the best in the NFL, not only on your team, but in the NFL. So it's going to be something to really keep an eye on. And speaking to your point real quick about him not opting out, talk about a man on a mission. I mean, he is ready to clear his name of any wrongdoing in Washington or however they tried to paint him as the bad guy in that situation. He's ready to come out and ball. Now, Matt, do you think that he's going to be like all pro type good, or do you think that it's that's more of a political ranking?
That's awards. I mean, that is what it is. I'm sure he'll have some gaudy, ridiculous 42 million power score PFF number. It's all just made up. What I want to see is him pancaking the shit out of people and knocking them on their back and protecting Jimmy. And we'll see that in the overall sack numbers. We'll see in, how he's moving and stuff like that. And, it's important for him to go through these practices again after a year away, get these calluses built up by going against the best in the business every day, get used to that contact. And as long as everybody stays healthy, man, this is going to be a top 10 offensive line in the NFL without question for me. So, and that goes, the whole line needs to stay healthy. It's not just Trent Williams, who's had a year off. And again, you lose that day to day, those calluses, you can't just go from the street to contact. And, like we talked about before, there's being in shape, and then there's being in football shape, ready to go. And the contact and the ability to absorb that contact on a down-to-down basis is part of being in football shape. So it's going to be, again, no preseason games, limited practice with the way that you can, do things, trial by fire for Trent Williams. So it'll be interesting to see how he can hold up. We expect Weston Richburg to be coming back. Hopefully he can hold up. And like I said, if they can, top 10 offensive line.
Yeah, there's lofty expectations for this whole offense, but specifically this offensive line, because there's no more excuses. These guys are getting healthy, and they should be performing at a pretty high level. Now, Matt, let me ask you this. How much does Trent Williams play kind of correlate to how well Jimmy Garoppolo is going to play?
I mean, you can't have a turnstile at left tackle and do anything with it. But at the same time, he needs protection from everywhere. It's going to be one of those things where if defense knows they can't get by Trent Williams, but they can get by somebody like, Mike McGlinchey or, Ben Garland or whoever it may be, Brunskill, whoever is playing the position, that's where they're going to concentrate their attack. So a good offensive line is only as good as its weakest link. I certainly don't think that Trent Williams is going to be that, I think he's going to be the strongest member of that unit. So for me, it's going to be a situation where I don't think there's going to be a lot of strip sacks is where I think that's going to come in. Jimmy had a problem last year where he would hold on to the ball too long and somebody would come on his backside and smack at the ball and it'd fall out. So I don't know the number of fumbles he had. I know it was too many. So if Trent Williams can help clean that up and direct traffic, in a different direction, that'll be a welcome change. So, it'll help Jimmy Garoppolo if he can cut down on the turnovers, because I do know that, and you can see it in his eyes. He makes a turnover, and while he has a short memory because he was one of the best in the NFL after throwing an interception, you can still see that it kind of ruffles him a little bit. And so, an upright and clean Jimmy with a clean jersey at the end of the game is what we want to see.
Yeah, definitely. And can we just talk about what an absolute steal getting Trent Williams was for the 49ers? Yeah. I mean, they sent a 156 pick in this draft and a 2021 third rounder for a guy of his caliber. Like, you can't get that type of player with those picks. So
exactly. And you contrast this with the Jamal Adams trade that Seattle made. And we're talking about, if you're talking about positional value, you're talking about a cornerstone left tackle versus a safety, and look at what was given up for those things. And if Trent Williams can be anything like he was prior in Washington, I mean, that makes that deal look even more ridiculous than it already does. You're talking about, I mean, that's minimal picks for a guy of Trent Williams' caliber. So it's another good job by John Lynch and this regime.
Yeah, that's for sure. Real quick, I just want to talk about Joe Staley. He was talking about, last season, he really started to question, is this it for him when he was going up against Nick Bosa? And he was kind of thinking, wow, I feel like I don't really have it anymore. Well, that same Nick Bosa is now going up against Trent Williams in practice. Yep. So like we've said, Trent Williams certainly has his hands full. He's going to be going up against the best of the best. He should be ready to go come week 1. But of course, there's still those jitters getting back on the field, I'm sure. But hey, we're all hoping for the best for him. And I think he'll impress us both.
Absolutely.
A special breaking news edition of Niners News. Matt, it finally happened. The 49ers finally signed George Kittle to an extension, a monster extension at that. It's being reported by Ian Rappaport and Michael Silver of NFL Network. 5 years, $75 million. What are your thoughts on this? It finally happened, man.
It did finally happen after the weeks of misinformation and the will he, won't he, and everybody prematurely spilling their reporting everywhere all over my Twitter feed. It finally happened. George Kittle is going to remain a San Francisco 49er for the foreseeable future. He earned it. I mean, that's case in point. And I actually predicted about 15 million. I know that like the initial talk was wide receiver money. I never thought it was going to be that. Rob Gronkowski's second contract really set the tight end market back. He took like a huge hometown discount for the Patriots. And I think that kind of screwed people over. So George resetting the market really is more like a course correction for the tight end position that has kind of been held back by that Gronkowski contract. And you saw it immediately afterward as the NFL's second best tight end took the NFL's second best tight end contract, thereby admitting that George Kittle's the best, really. Kelsey re-upped with KC for between 14 and 15 million. But back to Kittle, I mean, you know, you love to see it. He's the heart and soul of the team. When you think 49ers in, 2020, last year into this year going forward, you think of certain people, the leaders of the team, and George Kittle's right there amongst the top. So, congrats to him. He earned it, man.
Yeah, he really did. First of all, I agree with that. Congratulations to George Kittle, 5th rounder. Nobody knew of this guy. Probably a lot of people didn't even know who he was coming out of Iowa. No disrespect to him, obviously, but he was just a little known guy. And
yeah, I didn't even go to Iowa, and I caught more passes at Iowa than he did in his college career. It's ridiculous, man. No, but yeah, he was. Everybody was like, "Oh, he's the blocking guy." Well, except for Doug Gottlieb, who I don't know. He doesn't think George Kittle's a blocker. He's not really a blocker. Anyway, everybody knew he was a blocker or whatever. But nobody knew that he was going to be this dynamic in the offense, and it goes beyond just a Shanahan offense. I mean, Kittle has speed, he has power, he has great hands. He's a total package. He's the best tight end I've ever seen. And that's everybody's gonna be like, oh, well, that's a homer take. But I mean, he really does it all, maybe prime Gronkowski, but there wasn't enough there as far as he didn't do it for long enough. He was always getting hurt. So if George Kittle can, stay the course and stay healthy, he's going to be the best tight end the NFL's ever seen.
Yeah, he certainly has all the skills, all the traits. He has it together already, and he's so young in his NFL career. It's kind of scary to think. But when this news broke, man, I was so hyped. We were kind of getting, going back and forth with excitement. Grant Cohn obviously reported earlier yesterday that it did break, that it was already going to happen Friday. And then, Bleacher Report kind of blasted him, which I found really strange. Called it a fake report. Not incorrect, but fake.
That was a little harsh,
yeah. Yeah, that was a bit off, but it was just weird to see. And just real quick, I just want to touch on this. I thought it was a little weird, and maybe this is just the nature of reporting and breaking stories, but not too long ago, earlier this week even, NFL Network's Michael Silver was reporting, that they're going so slow, and he made the inchworm emoji kind of trend on Twitter about how Kittle's agent Jack Becta tweeted him that, and the Niners are going way too slow with this. And then the next thing we hear out of Michael Silver is it's a done deal. Credit me for the story. So I don't know. It's just maybe that's just how breaking news happens. Maybe Becta released that information to get some leverage on his side. Who knows?
Maybe. But I mean, Mike Silver should know better anyway than to just. I mean, he was texted a worm emoji, right? Well, that can mean any number of things. That they were really far apart. Or that they were really close on the details, but it was just taking forever to hammer out. They could have had the basic framework for the contract done, and it was just the details that needed to be worked out before, they could announce it or whatever. So for him to say that, like, oh, this indicates that they're nowhere close. Like, again, it's the same thing that Grant did, where he texted out all these details, and it's the rush to be first instead of the waiting to be accurate on things, which is the more important thing. But yeah, so Silver saying, credit me. Well, really, we should credit Barstool. George Kittle is a big Barstool fan, and, it's going around on Twitter that Pardon My Take had it first. So, credit to them. As far as Grant goes, he's getting pretty beat up. It's, I can't say it's not his fault, considering this came right on the heels of his things are heating up with the Jamal Adams thing. So his SI run has not gone the best so far. I wish him well, and I hope he can, get back on track. I don't think it's any skin off his back. He doesn't seem to me like the type of guy who cares about that stuff. But, again, be accurate rather than be first. When somebody like Adam Schefter comes out, that's correct information. If Jake Laser comes out, it's correct information, because they don't put things out there that they haven't vetted thoroughly enough to be confident and put their reputation on the line. That's not something they do.
And, touching back on your initial point of your response, the intro emoji, maybe that meant tequila shots. Maybe they were taking shots with the warm. Who knows? There's so many different meanings that could have meant. And he kind of took that and interpreted it as that. So, yeah, that's a great point. He kind of made his own definition out of an emoji. But touching on George Kittle, just how deserving this man is of this contract extension. He came in, worked his tail off, really, really got, people probably weren't even thinking he was going to make the roster his rookie year. And not only did he make it, but he excelled. And I saw CBS headquarters, CBS Sports, one of their accounts tagged me in a photo of comparing George Kittle to Travis Kelce. And I was at work, and out of nowhere, my phone was blowing up with all these notifications of people talking crap about Kittle and praising Kelce. And I'm like, what did I get tagged in? And I realized that that's what it was. But I feel like the Chiefs fans' main argument was, oh, but Kittle can block, which isn't that big of a deal. I'm just going to put it out there. The only thing that George Kittle is better than Kelce, it's not just blocking. He's better at Kelce than a lot of things. Kelce may be the better pure receiver, but as an overall tight end, which is what you want in a player, a well-balanced player, Kittle is better. And that's not a stretch or a hot take to say, although they might find that offensive. It's the truth. It's simply the truth. And comparing George Kittle's first couple of years to Travis Kelce's most recent couple of years, when Kelce's already in his prime, it's not fair. It's not fair.
I mean, that's BS to me. Let's be real. George Kittle broke the all-time single-season tight end yard mark with C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins throwing him the majority of the passes. Meanwhile, Kelce was hot on his heels with a 5,000-yard, 50-touchdown MVP, Patrick Mahomes. People want to talk crap about, Jimmy G's not that great of a quarterback, and Kittle is still putting up numbers. So don't tell me that Travis Kelce is this god when he's got Patrick Mahomes, one of the best quarterbacks in football, throwing him the football. He doesn't block. He sits on, intermediate routes really in, zone coverage and picks people apart. And he's really good at that. I'm not going to, take that away from him. What he does, he's good at, but he's not as good as Kittle. And if you take everything else into account, it's not even really that close, It
really isn't. But how much do you think this speaks to George Kittle completely buying into the culture and the environment going on with the 49ers right now?
I mean, he's 100% in it. I mean, I don't think that he got everything that he wanted out of this deal. And let's be honest, this is a very team-friendly deal when you look at the actual breakdown. It's $575, which would be $15 million AAV if you just broke it straight up. He got $18 million for signing, $30 million fully guaranteed, $40 million guaranteed against injury. So fully guaranteed, that's less than half of this contract is fully guaranteed. And after this $18 million signing bonus, after 2020 season going into 2021, there's only $12 million in fully guaranteed money left on the deal. So Parag did it again. The regime did it again. They're just really good at structuring these team-friendly contracts that allow them flexibility. And I think really what this is he's going to get 3 years into this deal in his age 29 season, and they're going to extend him out again is probably what I'm thinking. But it does allow for them to restructure if they need to so that they can keep some key pieces. And unlike, all the Kelce lapdogs in Kansas City, I mean, you got Patrick Mahomes took $500 million or whatever it was, that astronomical contract, that funny money contract, and then they paid the defensive end, Chris Jones. There's a lot of Joneses in the NFL. I was thinking Chandler Jones in my head, but Chris Jones, they paid him. They just paid Kelce, and they're very quickly going to become like the Los Angeles Rams, a very top-heavy cap team. And they're not going to be able to keep a lot of the support players that you need to maintain relevance and maintain an open Super Bowl window for the long haul.
And touching on your first point there, $40 million. I was watching the Pat McAfee show over on Barstool, and he was saying how many teams can get the face of the franchise, the best player on their roster, for $40 million guaranteed. I mean, we just saw the Chargers give up.
Well, that's injury guarantee. That's not even
Exactly.
fully guaranteed. That's like that. If he doesn't get injured, I mean, that's not really guaranteed money. So it's really 30 million fully guaranteed. That 10 million, that extra 10 million in there is to guarantee against injury. But like, that's nothing.
Yeah.
You know.
And that drives the point even further. 30 million, and they got the face of their franchise, best player on the team, seventh best according to his peers in the whole NFL, for 30 million guaranteed. And it's no slight against George Kittle, but just like Pat McAfee was saying, that's the nature of the position that he plays. I think broken down, if he were to be paid like a receiver, I think he's behind Jarvis Landry on top paid receivers. And you could make the argument that, obviously he's a better overall player than Jarvis Landry. However, he's a tight end, and he's getting paid like the best tight end in the NFL. And he blew that market up. He completely reset it.
Yeah.
Which was needed.
Exactly. That goes back to that Rob Gronkowski contract that really screwed over tight ends for a long time. People are saying, oh, well, it's not, he wants wide receiver money. I think he just wanted to reset the tight end market so that tight ends get, because tight ends are becoming more in vogue. A lot of this RPO stuff, with a lot of, the read option and stuff like that. You're seeing a lot more tight ends becoming integral parts of a passing game. You see it. I mean, Baltimore just keeps drafting tight ends and tight ends and tight ends for Lamar Jackson. He's going to have like 18 tight ends and one receiver on his team before too long. It's going to be Hollywood Brown on the outside and then all tight ends, It just goes to show how important they are. And I think that George, had a goal in mind to reset that market. He did. So his contract before the Kelsey re-upping was about 140%, 145% of what Hooper signed for. So, that's, I mean, when you go 100% plus half more, I mean, that's pretty good.
It's very good. And real quick, I just want to touch on this. Drea Blackwell of KSBW. We had her on about a month ago, and she did predict, she had to say roughly about 15 mil, if I had to guess. And she said, credit her if she got it right. So we did credit her. We tweeted out, shout out to Drea. I'll put the link to that video, that link to that interview in the description if you guys want to go check it out. She was a great guest. I just had to shout her out because that was cool that she kind of predicted that correctly.
Oh, it was. She got it spot on.
Yeah, she did. Yeah. But I think that's going to do it for us today, guys. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. Our handles are below on the screen. I just want to thank you for tuning in to our breaking news video. 49ers finally got the extension of George Kittle out of the way. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, and drop a comment below on your thoughts of George Kittle being a 49er for a long time.
Go ahead and click the bell for all your notifications. And until next time, go Niners.